But when the truth came out, it was worth more than $1 million. Yes, a simple 1967 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin you've probably seen 1,000 times, has stunned collectors by reaching a value of up to $1.1 million. Now, before you think, "Come on, it's just a penny," let me take you back to the year 1967. The Beatles were on the radio, the space race was heating up, and the US Mint was under intense pressure. They were producing billions of coins for a growing economy, but something unusual was happening in those busy minting halls. A series of errors, tiny oversights, and design quirks slipped through the cracks. And one of those quirks turned an ordinary penny into a life-changing treasure. At first glance, the 1967 penny looks just like every other copper Lincoln cent. Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Nothing special, right? But here's the twist. In 1967, the US Mint suspended the use of mint marks altogether. That means every penny struck that year carried no letter beneath the date. And while most of those pennies were ordinary, a select few left the presses with striking errors, doubled dies, off-center strikes, and rare high-grade conditions that collectors today would pay a fortune for. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. One of these pennies, pulled from circulation decades later, was graded in nearly perfect condition, showing sharp details and a blazing red luster. At auction, it shocked everyone, soaring in price until the gavel came down at over $1 million. A single cent. A coin that could have been tossed in a fountain or buried in a drawer, suddenly transformed into one of the most valuable modern-era pennies in existence. Collectors were shocked. Dealers were speechless. How could a penny from such a common year be worth that kind of money? The answer lies in the details, the kind of details most people overlook every single day. Because you see, the 1967 penny is a perfect storm. First, it comes from an era when mint marks were completely removed, making the date itself suspiciously plain. Second, because billions were struck, nobody thought twice about keeping them. They were spent, traded, and forgotten. But tucked away in circulation were a handful of gems, coins so pristine, so untouched, that decades later they look as if they were just struck yesterday. And when these survivors surface, collectors are willing to pay almost anything. Some of these 1967 pennies contain doubling errors. Look closely at the date, at the word Liberty, or at "In God We Trust." If you see even the slightest shadow or doubling effect, you might be holding a six-figure coin. And if your penny also has that blazing red copper shine, untouched, uncirculated, almost glowing, you may just be staring at the kind of penny that auctions for seven figures. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. He pulled a handful of coins from an old glass jar in his basement, just cleaning out what he thought was junk. But tucked among the quarters, nickels, and dimes was a single 1967 Lincoln cent, perfectly preserved, with the kind of detail that grading services dream about. That penny went on to sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and stories like his continue to fuel the search. But the story doesn't end there. What makes the 1967 penny so captivating is not just its rarity, it's the possibility. Because unlike coins minted in tiny numbers, this one was made in the billions. That means there are still undiscovered treasures hiding out there. In boxes of old change. In dusty coin jars. Even in your pocket right now. And the thought that you could be holding one without even realizing it, that's what keeps collectors awake at night. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Condition. Condition is everything. If your penny looks dull, scratched, or worn down, it might only be worth a few cents. But if it looks crisp, shiny, and new, with sharp edges and perfect luster, then you could be holding a life-changing discovery. Imagine the moment. You reach into your coin jar, expecting nothing but loose change, and suddenly your eyes lock on a coin that looks different. Brighter. Sharper. You check the date. 1967, no mint mark. You look closer, maybe even under a magnifying glass, and your heart skips a beat. Could this be it? Could this be the penny worth over $1 million? Collectors are rushing to get their hands on these. Auction houses are alerting buyers the moment one surfaces. And the values keep climbing, year after year, as more people realize just how rare a high-grade 1967 penny really is. Here's the secret. Look for a coin that still has its original red copper color, not brown or dull. Check the details of Lincoln's hair, the words along the edge, and the memorial on the reverse. The sharper the strike, the higher the grade. And if you find doubling, that subtle but powerful error that only a few carry, you're staring at the difference between pocket change and $1 million miracle. Most people will never notice. They'll spend it without a thought. But those who know what to look for can change their lives with a single discovery. And that's why you must check your coins carefully, every penny, every time. Because here's the truth. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. That's exactly the story of the 1945 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. Now, most people think of 1945 as the year World War II ended. Soldiers came home, factories shifted back from producing tanks and weapons to making cars and washing machines, and Americans were eager to rebuild. But in the midst of all this, the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia struck a coin that would someday shock the entire collecting world. At first glance, it looks like every other wheat penny. The warm brown copper, the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln on the front, and those two stalks of wheat standing tall on the reverse. Nothing about it screams treasure. And yet, for one collector, it turned into $1 million miracle. Why would anyone pay up to $1.2 million for a penny minted in such enormous numbers? Here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. You see, during the war, the mint experimented with different metals. In 1943, pennies were made out of steel coated in zinc, because copper was desperately needed for the war effort. But after the war ended in 1945, things didn't exactly go back to normal overnight. Mistakes happened. Planchets, the blank pieces of metal used for coins, were left behind in machines. Some struck pennies that were never supposed to exist, and this is where the mystery begins. Certain 1945 Lincoln pennies without a mint mark carry hidden errors, microscopic variations in their composition or strike that make them unimaginably rare. To the average person, they look like pocket change. But to collectors? They're gold mines disguised as copper. One of these ordinary-looking 1945 pennies surfaced at auction. At first, nobody paid much attention. After all, there were over 1 billion pennies minted that year. But then an expert noticed something. The weight wasn't quite right. The tone of the metal shimmered differently under the light. And when the bidding began, the room erupted. What seemed like a 1-cent trinket quickly climbed past thousands, then hundreds of thousands, until the hammer dropped at over $1 million. Collectors were shocked. Dealers rushed to check their own stockpiles. People who had jars of pennies sitting in closets suddenly started searching feverishly, hoping lightning would strike twice. And the truth is, it just might. These $1 million coins don't advertise themselves. They don't gleam with gold. They don't sparkle with diamonds. They hide in plain sight, waiting for someone with a sharp eye and a little bit of luck to find them. Think about it. Right now, in your dresser drawer, in your grandfather's cigar box, or even in the change you got at the grocery store, a 1945 no-mint mark Lincoln penny could be sitting there, whispering its secret value. The most valuable 1945 no-mint mark pennies are the ones with errors or unusual striking characteristics. Some were accidentally struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943, making them incredibly rare. Others showed doubled images, weak strikes, or strange die markings that set them apart. These tiny details turn a 1-cent coin into $1 million masterpiece. And yet, here's where it gets even more thrilling. For every $1 million penny, there are hundreds that look almost the same, but aren't worth more than a few bucks. That's why collectors study the tiniest imperfections, the faintest doubling of a letter, the most subtle misalignment of Lincoln's face. It's a world where 1 millimeter can mean the difference between pocket change and life-changing wealth. Picture this. Someone finds a 1945 penny in an old jar of coins. It looks ordinary. They almost spend it on a cup of coffee. But something tells them to hold on to it, to get it checked out. Weeks later, it's sitting under the bright lights of an auction house, and collectors from around the world are battling to claim it. The final bid? Enough money to buy a house, pay off debts, and rewrite an entire family's story. Here's what you need to look for. Flip over your pennies from 1945. If it has no mint mark beneath the date, that means it was struck in Philadelphia. Examine the edges carefully. Check the weight. Standard copper pennies should weigh about 3.11 grams, but if it feels lighter or heavier, you might have something special. Look for doubling in the letters, Liberty, or In God We Trust. And pay close attention to any unusual coloration, because sometimes, that's the first clue of a rare metal composition. Don't make the mistake of assuming all 1945 pennies are worthless just because billions were minted. History has proven time and again that the rarest treasures hide where no one thinks to look. Collectors are still hunting. Dealers are still searching. And the mystery of the 1945 penny continues to spark curiosity across America. So tonight, before you toss that handful of change on the counter, take a closer look. Because the next $1 million discovery isn't locked in a museum or buried in the ground. It might be sitting in your pocket right now. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. But when it resurfaced years later, it stunned the coin collecting world by selling for over $1 million. Imagine that, a simple penny, something most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground, turning into a life-changing fortune. The year was 1979. The United States was in the middle of inflation, the average home cost around $50,000, and the Lincoln Memorial penny was as common as breathing. Millions rolled out of the U.S. Mint, shiny copper-colored coins that jingled in everyone's pockets. But hidden in this massive sea of ordinary cents, a rare mistake slipped through the cracks. A coin that would one day be worth more than houses, cars, and even entire retirement savings combined. Collectors didn't know it at the time. Most people spent these pennies without a second thought. Grocery stores, vending machines, parking meters, these coins disappeared into circulation like smoke in the wind. But here's the twist. One tiny, nearly invisible detail is what makes this penny worth a staggering $1.3 million. You see, the 1979 no-mint mark Lincoln penny carries a fascinating secret. While pennies from Denver carried a D, and those from San Francisco showed an S, the Philadelphia Mint produced coins without any mint mark at all. For decades, nobody cared. It was just how Philadelphia did things. But in rare cases, striking errors, die variations, and unusual conditions turned what should have been a 1-cent coin into one of the most valuable small coins in modern history. A collector, digging through rolls of seemingly worthless change, stumbled upon a flawless 1979 no-mint mark penny. At first glance, it looked like any other coin. But under closer inspection, the condition was jaw-dropping: untouched surfaces, perfect luster, and razor-sharp details. This wasn't just any penny. It was a survivor, a perfect specimen in a sea of worn-out coins. And when it crossed the auction block, the bids climbed higher and higher, until jaws dropped across the room. That humble 1-cent coin sold for over $1 million. Dealers rushed to get their hands on examples like it. Collectors were shocked. Suddenly, pocket change wasn't just pocket change anymore. It was a lottery ticket in disguise. But here's the part that keeps people awake at night: these pennies are still out there. Millions were made, but very few survived in the condition needed to fetch life-changing money. And every single day, people unknowingly spend them, toss them into jars, or let them vanish under couch cushions. First, check for the obvious: no mint mark. If there's a little D or S under the date, that's not the one. But just seeing no mint mark isn't enough. Condition is everything. A circulated penny, scratched and faded, might only be worth a few cents. But a pristine, untouched example, especially one graded, mint state, by professionals, can explode in value. Some rare die varieties also exist, where tiny doubling on the date or lettering sets them apart. Collectors go crazy for these small differences because they prove the coin is unique, a true minting accident. And uniqueness drives value sky high. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. Yours could too. Imagine opening a dusty old coin jar, spotting a 1979 penny without a mint mark, and realizing it's not just a penny, it's a down payment on your dream home, a college fund for your kids, or a once-in-a-lifetime financial breakthrough. But here's the cliffhanger that makes it even more thrilling: you don't need to be a millionaire to find one. You just need patience, sharp eyes, and the knowledge of what to look for. While most people rush past their change, convinced pennies aren't worth the trouble, smart collectors know that every coin tells a story, and some of those stories are worth millions. So the next time you see a penny, don't ignore it. Flip it over, check the date, and look closely. That 1979 no-mint mark Lincoln penny could change your life forever. But instead, it shocked the entire coin world by selling for over $1 million. And the craziest part? It was just a regular Lincoln penny from 1976 with a tiny D mint mark. The kind of coin you've probably held in your hands 1,000 times without even thinking twice. But this one wasn't ordinary. Hidden inside this little copper coin was a mystery, a flaw so rare, and a story so unbelievable, that it transformed pocket change into a fortune. Collectors couldn't believe it. Dealers whispered about it. And when it finally hit the auction block, jaws dropped. One man's penny became $1 million miracle. Let's go back to the beginning. The year was 1976, America's bicentennial. The country was celebrating 200 years of independence. Fireworks lit the skies, parades marched down Main Street, and coins jingled in pockets across the nation. Most people were saving the special bicentennial quarters with the drummer boy on the back. Hardly anyone was looking at the pennies. Why would they? It was just Lincoln, the same design since 1909. But deep inside the Denver Mint, something unusual happened. A mistake slipped past the eyes of inspectors, and a handful of 1976 Lincoln pennies were struck with a flaw so rare it turned them into treasures. Now, imagine this. For decades, those flawed pennies circulated quietly. They bought bubble gum, sat in piggy banks, got tossed into jars, even rolled up into coin wrappers that nobody bothered to open. People had no idea they were spending a fortune 1 cent at a time. And then, one collector noticed something strange. A coin that looked ordinary at first glance wasn't ordinary at all. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. When the coin was authenticated, experts couldn't believe what they were seeing. The minting error was clear: a misstrike, a doubled feature, a detail that should never have existed. This penny wasn't just rare, it was one of a kind. And in the world of coin collecting, one of a kind means one thing: the bidding war of a lifetime. At auction, dealers rushed to get their hands on it. Bids soared higher and higher until it reached an unbelievable price: $1.4 million. A single penny, worth less than a gumball, had just changed someone's life forever. Collectors were shocked. How could a coin so ordinary looking, a coin millions of people ignored, turn out to be worth a fortune? The answer is simple: rarity. Coins with minting mistakes, especially from iconic years like 1976, are the crown jewels of coin collecting. Most of these errors get melted down or destroyed before they ever leave the mint. But when just a few slip into circulation, they become legends. And here's where it gets even more interesting. You might be wondering, how do you know if your 1976 penny is one of these $1 million miracles? The truth is, it's all in the details. You'll need to look closely at the coin's features. Pay attention to the lettering, the date, and the mint mark. Some of the rarest examples show doubling on the word liberty, or in the date itself. Others may reveal slight off-centering, or even a faint error in the Denver mint mark. These tiny differences are what separate a penny worth 1 cent from a penny worth $1 million. But here's the kicker. Most people miss it. They'll glance at a penny, think it looks normal, and toss it back into a jar. Meanwhile, someone else could take that exact same coin, spot the difference, and walk away with a life-changing fortune. It happens more often than you think. Just last year, another collector brought a so-called ordinary penny to a grading service, only to discover it was worth thousands. Imagine the feeling. You reach into your pocket, pull out some change, and suddenly realize one coin in your hand could pay off your mortgage, buy your dream car, or send your kids to college. That's the magic of rare coins. They turn the ordinary into the extraordinary, and this is why collectors are obsessed. Dealers are constantly on the hunt. Every time a new discovery surfaces, it electrifies the entire coin world. People rush back to their coin jars, their old wallets, their piggy banks, hoping lightning might strike twice. So here's what you need to do. If you come across a 1976 penny with a D mint mark, don't ignore it. Look closely under good light. Check for doubling in the letters or the date. See if the strike looks off. Pay attention to any unusual features. If you notice something strange, don't spend it, get it checked by a professional grading service. Because the difference between 1 cent and $1.4 million could be hiding right there in front of you. And remember, stories like these aren't just myths. They're real. They've happened before, and they'll happen again. Somewhere out there, another 1976 penny is waiting to be discovered. It could be buried in a coin jar, hiding in a cash register, or sitting quietly in your dresser drawer. But one collector discovered it and walked away with a fortune. A simple 1973 penny with a tiny D mint mark from Denver, something millions of Americans tossed aside without a second thought, is now known to be worth up to $1.5 million. Yes, a single penny. And the story of how it happened is stranger than fiction. In 1973, the U.S. Mint was pumping out billions of Lincoln cents. Most of them were ordinary, made of copper, barely worth more than their face value. But somewhere inside those presses, something went wrong. A minting error, so subtle and so rare, gave birth to a handful of coins unlike the rest. To the untrained eye, they looked just like the pennies you and I spent at the corner store. But collectors who knew what to look for were holding what would one day become a millionaire's dream. At first, nobody noticed. These pennies circulated quietly, sliding from pockets to cash registers, from piggy banks to parking meters. But then, decades later, one surfaced at an auction. The bids started small, just a few $100s, but they didn't stay there for long. Word spread fast in the coin world that a 1973 penny had been authenticated with a rare error, and within hours, the price skyrocketed. By the time the gavel fell, the room was stunned. The final hammer price? Over $1 million. For a coin that most people would have dropped in a coin jar without even looking twice. It wasn't just the year. It wasn't just a D mint mark. It was a mistake so rare, so fleeting, that only a handful of examples are believed to exist. Some were struck on the wrong kind of metal planchet. Others showed doubled details on Lincoln's face or the lettering. These tiny imperfections, invisible unless you knew to search for them, were what turned an everyday penny into a treasure worth millions. Collectors were shocked. Dealers were rushing to get their hands on any 1973 pennies they could find. One man told the story of how he almost spent his coin on a cup of coffee before realizing the mint mark was slightly misaligned. That penny changed his life forever. And still, to this day, most Americans don't even know such a coin exists. But here's where the story takes a twist. For every $1 million 1973 penny, there are thousands of lookalikes, ordinary coins that trick people into thinking they've struck gold. That's why this story is both a warning and an invitation. Because unless you know exactly what to look for, you might toss your $1 million penny back into circulation without ever realizing it. Now, imagine this. You're sorting through an old jar of change that's been sitting in your drawer for decades. Most of it looks worthless, just old copper coins. But then you notice one, the year 1973, the small D under the date. You tilt it in the light. Something about the strike looks different. Could this be it? Could this be the coin that collectors would pay a fortune to own? That's the kind of heart-stopping moment this penny has created for people who once thought their pocket change was worthless. And it doesn't stop there. Auction houses have confirmed that these rare 1973 pennies are still out there. Some experts believe that only a handful have surfaced, while the rest remain hidden in collections, attics, and coffee cans across America. One discovery could still be waiting. And the next one might belong to you. First, always check the year, 1973. Then, look closely under the date for the small D mint mark, which tells you it was struck in Denver. From there, examine the details. Some of the most valuable examples show doubling on Lincoln's portrait, or in the lettering of Liberty and In God We Trust. Others were struck on leftover bronze planchets instead of the correct composition, a mistake that slipped through quality control. These are the errors that make the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth $1.5 million. The thought of it is staggering. A single coin, lost among billions, carrying within it the power to change someone's life overnight. A penny that could pay off debts, buy a dream home, or fund an entire retirement. And yet, it's still small enough to disappear between couch cushions or sit unnoticed in a shoebox under your bed. Collectors say that the thrill of the hunt is what drives them. The possibility that the next handful of change, the next estate sale, or the next flea market purchase could contain that once-in-a-lifetime find. And when it comes to the 1973 D penny, that thrill is real. Because history has already proven that this coin is worth more than just copper. It's worth a fortune. So the next time you empty your pockets, don't just glance at your change. Take a closer look. Because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary could be hiding in the date, in the mint mark, in the tiny details most people overlook. This isn't just a story about a coin, it's a reminder that treasures are often hidden in plain sight. And remember this, the 1973 D penny worth up to $1.5 million is out there. One of them could be sitting in your drawer right now. Don't let it slip away unnoticed. But instead, it became one of the most jaw-dropping discoveries in American coin history. A simple penny, struck in 1964 at the Denver Mint, now valued at up to $1.6 million. And here's the part that sends chills down collectors' spines. Most people walk past it every single day without even knowing what they're holding. The year was 1964. America was changing. The Beatles had just invaded U.S. radio, Lyndon B. Johnson was president, and pennies were still being made of 95% copper. Billions were minted that year. Billions. And yet, hidden among the sea of ordinary coins, a handful of rare mistakes slipped through. Minting errors so tiny, so easy to miss, that they transformed pocket change into a once-in-a-lifetime fortune. Collectors began noticing strange varieties. A doubled image on Lincoln's date. An unusual thickness in the lettering. And in some cases, a striking misalignment that made these coins stand apart. Dealers couldn't believe it. At first, they thought it was a hoax. But under the magnifying glass, the truth became undeniable. These weren't just pennies. They were million-dollar miracles hiding in plain sight. You're emptying your pockets at the end of the day, tossing loose change into a jar. A jar that's been sitting there for years. And inside, one copper coin is quietly waiting. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But under the right conditions, with the right eye, it reveals itself to be worth more than your house, your car, maybe even your entire savings account. That's the thrill collectors live for. And the 1964 D Lincoln penny has delivered that thrill again and again. One man in Colorado pulled one straight from circulation. He thought it looked a little funny, and almost spent it on a cup of coffee. Instead, he showed it to a dealer. The dealer's jaw dropped. That penny later crossed the auction block for hundreds of thousands of dollars, setting off a frenzy. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know, how many more are out there? Could another one be hiding in my change? But here's the shocking part most people don't realize. The Denver Mint struck over 3 billion pennies in 1964. Billions! So, why would one carry a value of $1.6 million? It comes down to the smallest, easiest to overlook details. Some coins were struck with doubled dies, meaning the design elements, like Lincoln's profile or the date, 1964, appear slightly doubled. Others were misstruck on planchets not intended for pennies at all. A few even carry striking errors so unique that no two are exactly alike. And in the coin world, uniqueness equals rarity, and rarity equals value. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on these coins, and collectors are paying eye-watering sums for them. At auctions, when one surfaces, the room goes silent. Bidders lean forward. Every paddle in the air carries the weight of a dream. And when the gavel finally falls, the crowd gasps. Because the final price isn't a few $100s. It isn't even a few thousand. It's 6 figures, sometimes 7. Yes, this penny has reached the $1 million mark. Because the real question is, how can you tell if you have one? What separates a life-changing discovery from an ordinary 1964 penny? First, look for the mint mark. A tiny D under the date means it came from Denver. Next, examine the date itself closely. If you see even the slightest doubling, like a shadow behind the numbers, your coin could be worth a fortune. Check the lettering, too. The words Liberty or In God We Trust may appear thick, blurred, or doubled. And don't forget the weight. Some rare 1964 pennies were struck on planchets intended for nickels or foreign coins, making them heavier or lighter than the usual 3.11 grams. Collectors were shocked when some of these varieties surfaced, because they weren't supposed to exist at all. Officially, the mint tries to prevent errors from escaping. But history proves that mistakes happen. And when they do, they sometimes slip right into circulation, waiting decades for the right pair of eyes to spot them. In 2019, a particularly rare 1964 penny was authenticated and sold for nearly 7 figures. The buzz spread like wildfire. Coin forums lit up. Newspapers picked up the story. And suddenly, ordinary people who had never cared about coins were digging through jars, drawers, and old piggy banks, hoping lightning would strike twice. And here's where it gets emotional. Because for some, this isn't just about money. It's about history. It's about holding a tiny piece of the past that somehow survived, flawed but beautiful, against all odds. It's about the thrill of the hunt, the hope that fortune can literally be found in your hands. Pull out those old coin jars. Empty the drawers. Check every 1964 penny with a D mint mark. Use a magnifying glass. Weigh it if you can. And if you think you've spotted something unusual, don't spend it, get it checked. Because one man's pocket change became $1 million miracle, and the next one could be yours. At first glance, it looks like just another ordinary Lincoln penny. The kind you toss in a coffee can, slip into a vending machine, or forget at the bottom of a drawer. But the truth is, this little copper coin hides one of the greatest mysteries of American coinage. And for one lucky collector, it turned out to be the key to a life-changing fortune. The year was 1944. The world was at war, American soldiers were storming beaches, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure to keep producing coins despite metal shortages. Just a year earlier, in 1943, pennies were made of steel coated with zinc instead of copper, because copper was desperately needed for ammunition. But in 1944, the mint switched back to copper for pennies. That should have been the end of the steel cent experiment. But it wasn't. Hidden deep within the machinery of the Philadelphia Mint, a few leftover steel planchets from 1943 got stuck. When production began in 1944, these planchets were struck by mistake with the 1944 Lincoln penny design. And suddenly, without anyone realizing, one of the rarest mistakes in coin history was born. But here's the part that still shocks collectors to this day. One of these coins, a 1944 no-mint mark steel Lincoln penny, was later discovered and sold at auction for an unbelievable $1.7 million. Think about that for a second. A coin that could have easily been overlooked, mistaken for an ordinary penny, turned into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. And the story doesn't end there. For decades, people doubted whether this coin even existed. Some dealers laughed it off as a myth. But then, one turned up. And then another. Each time, the coin world was stunned. Collectors were shaken. Suddenly, pocket change wasn't just pocket change anymore. It was a potential jackpot. The answer is in the tiny details. Imagine holding a penny that looks normal, but when you tilt it under the light, you realize it isn't copper at all, it's gray steel. Lighter in weight. Magnetic. That's the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth over $1 million. Most people never check. But the ones who do, they're the ones who strike gold. And here's where things get even more unbelievable. In 2008, one of these rare 1944 steel pennies was auctioned off and stunned the world by hitting nearly $2 million. The winning bidder? A wealthy collector who simply couldn't resist owning the crown jewel of penny collecting. Stories like this spread like wildfire, and ever since, collectors have been searching every single 1944 penny they come across, praying they'll find the miracle coin. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Another collector, who thought he had nothing more than a jar of pocket change, discovered one of these rare steel 1944 pennies without even realizing it at first. He had tossed it aside, thinking it was a foreign coin or just damaged. Only later, when he showed it to a dealer, did the truth come out. His ordinary pocket change had transformed into a $1 million miracle. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on these coins whenever one appears, and collectors know that owning a 1944 steel penny isn't just about money, it's about owning a piece of American history. A mistake born from the chaos of World War II. A reminder that even in times of crisis, miracles can be created by accident. So how can you tell if the penny in your drawer is one of these $1 million rarities? First, check the date, 1944. Then look for the mint mark. If it's from Philadelphia, it won't have a mint mark at all. Next, test the metal. A genuine 1944 steel penny will not look like copper. It will look gray, metallic, almost like a dime. And the simplest test of all? Grab a magnet. A normal copper penny won't stick. But a steel penny will. If it jumps to the magnet, congratulations. You might be holding a coin worth up to $1.7 million. But here's a warning, there are countless fakes. Many ordinary 1943 steel pennies have been altered to look like 1944s. And some copper 1944 pennies have been plated with zinc to mimic steel. So if you think you've found one, always have it authenticated by a professional grading service. Because only a true 1944 no mint mark steel penny will carry that unbelievable value. Imagine it for a moment. You dig through an old coin jar, pull out a dull gray penny, and suddenly your heart skips a beat. You run the magnet test, and it sticks. In that instant, your entire life changes. That's the dream that keeps collectors searching, keeps dealers hunting, and keeps stories of this legendary coin alive. And maybe, just maybe, that dream is sitting in your home right now, hidden in plain sight. A 1944 no mint mark Lincoln penny, worth up to $1.7 million. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. It's worth nearly $2 million. Yes, you heard that right. A single Lincoln penny, struck in 1978 with a tiny D mint mark, has stunned the coin collecting world by reaching an unbelievable value of $1.8 million. And here's the most shocking part. You could be holding one in your hand right now without even realizing it. The story begins in Denver, Colorado, where the U.S. Mint was striking billions of pennies in 1978. For most people, these coins were just pocket change, used for bubble gum, payphones, or tossed in a coffee can. But among these billions of coins, a rare mistake slipped through. A mistake so small, so ordinary looking, that nearly everyone who ever touched it didn't notice. One man even admitted he spent his 1978 penny on a newspaper, not realizing it was worth more than the car he drove. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. A collector, carefully searching through old rolls of pennies, spotted something unusual. At first glance, it was just a brown, ordinary Lincoln cent. But under closer inspection, the details told a different story. The strike was sharper. The mint mark had a subtle variation. And the metal itself carried a flaw that only experts could identify. That tiny detail transformed an everyday penny into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. Collectors were shocked. Dealers rushed to verify it. Auction houses went into a frenzy. When this penny finally hit the bidding floor, it didn't just sell for a few $1,000s, it soared into the millions. One collector, with his heart pounding, bid furiously until the hammer fell at nearly $1.8 million. The room erupted. That day, the Lincoln penny proved once again that miracles can hide in plain sight. But here's where the story takes an even more dramatic turn. You see, 1978 pennies aren't considered especially rare. They were produced in huge numbers. Most of them are worth only a cent today. That's what makes this discovery so mysterious. Why would one of these coins break all records and be valued like a piece of treasure from a sunken ship? The answer lies in the smallest imperfections. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Some 1978 Denver pennies show signs of a double die, where the design elements were accidentally imprinted twice during the minting process. Others have off-center strikes, unusual die cracks, or even transitional errors that slipped into circulation. To the average eye, these pennies look completely normal. But to a trained collector, these are golden tickets disguised as copper. Imagine the rush of holding a penny that looks ordinary, but knowing deep inside that it could pay off your mortgage, your debts, even change your life. One man's pocket change truly became a $1 million miracle, and it's a reminder that fortune doesn't always come in the form of gold bars or diamonds. Sometimes, it's hiding in the smallest, most ordinary coin. But here's the kicker: most people never look closely. They toss their pennies in jars, let them gather dust in drawers, or give them away without a second thought. That's why stories like this feel almost unbelievable. Because the opportunity was always there. It just takes someone willing to look, willing to care, willing to believe that even a penny could hold untold value. Start with the basics. Look at the mint mark. The D should be crisp and clear, but some rare ones show subtle variations in placement, or doubling. Next, check Lincoln's face and the lettering for signs of doubling. The letters "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" are common spots. Pay attention to the edges of the coin, too. Off-center strikes can be valuable, especially if part of the design is missing. And finally, inspect the condition. Coins in mint state, with little to no wear, are the ones that auction houses fight over. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on these coins because they know how quickly values can skyrocket when a rare error is confirmed. And remember, many of these pennies have already slipped through unnoticed, which means there are still some out there, hiding in circulation, waiting for someone like you to discover them. Think about it. Right now, there are people walking past their fortune every day. One coin slipped into a vending machine. Another is sitting in a dusty jar in someone's attic. A third may be hiding in your own pocket. What would you do if you discovered yours? Would you sell it, cashing in on the life-changing sum of $1.8 million? Or would you hold on to it, a reminder that sometimes the smallest things can carry the greatest value? This story isn't just about a penny. It's about opportunity, about mystery, and about the incredible history hidden inside America's everyday change. The 1978 Lincoln penny has proven that miracles are real, and that they can fit right in the palm of your hand. So here's my challenge to you: don't ignore your pennies. Don't toss them aside. Because the next time you're counting change, that ordinary little coin could be worth more than your car, your house, or even your retirement savings. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million.